I've decided to conduct a special military operation. It aims to protect people who've been bullied and subjected to genocide by the Kiev regime for 8 years. For that, we will strive for demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine. Whoever would try to stop us and further create threats to our country, to our people, should know that Russia's response will be immediate and lead you to such consequences that you have never faced in your history. We are ready for any outcome.
There is no purgatory for war criminals. They go straight to hell, Ambassador.
And to the Russian soldiers, we have this to say. You won't leave from here. We promise you this. Welcome to hell. We're warning you. You will die here. Die like lousy dogs if you enter our country. And your generals throwing you to this meat grinder will run away first. So drop your weapons and go back to your wives and kids. You have nothing to do here. It's not your land and won't ever be.
February 22nd, 2022.
A date which will live in infamy.
My fellow citizens, let no one doubt that this is a difficult and dangerous effort on which we have set out. No one can foresee precisely what course it will take, or what costs or casualties will be incurred. Our resolution will call for the prompt dismantling and withdrawal of all offensive weapons in Cuba under the supervision of UN observers before the quarantine can be lifted. Many months of sacrifice and self-discipline lie ahead, months in which both our patience and our will be tested, months in which many threats and denunciations will keep us aware of our dangers. But the greatest danger of all would be to do nothing. The path we have chosen for the present is full of hazards, as all paths are. But it is the one most consistent with our character and courage as a nation and our commitments around the world. The cost of freedom is always high, but Americans have always paid it. And one path we shall never choose, and that is the path of surrender or submission. Our goal is not the victory of might, but the vindication of right. Not peace at the expense of freedom, but both peace and freedom here in this hemisphere, and we hope around the world.
року Україну незалежною демократичною державою.
конечно, жил как все, но иногда приходилось подрабатывать и извозом. Неприятно об этом говорить, имеется в виду на машине подрабатывать, частным извозом. Неприятно об этом говорить, откровенно, честно, если сказать, но, к сожалению,
So American investors and businessmen look forward to doing business in the Soviet Union, including the Ukraine. I set forth a presidential initiative that is providing badly needed medical aid to the Soviet Union. And this aid expresses American solidarity with the Soviet peoples during a time of hardship and suffering. No society ever achieves perfect democracy, liberty, or enterprise. If it makes full use of its people's virtues and abilities, it can use these goals as guides to a better life. And now, as Soviet citizens try to forge a new social compact, you have the obligation to restore power to citizens demoralized by decades of totalitarian rule. I've come here today to say we support those who explore the frontiers of freedom. We will join these reformers on the path to what we appropriately call a new world order.
Russia and the US finally put pen to paper. The signing put into force the Strategic Arms Treaty, or START, the first ever accord to reduce long-range nuclear weapons. START 1 calls for the US and former Soviet Union to eliminate 9,000 long-range nuclear warheads, or 1/3 of their arsenals, over the next 7 years. At the same time, the Ukraine formally renounced nuclear arms by joining the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Ukraine inherited almost 2,000 warheads when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. President Clinton heralded both signings as the arrival of a new and safe era.
Skeptics once claimed that the nuclear threat would actually grow after the Soviet Union dissolved. But because of the wisdom and statesmanship of the leaders who joined me here, the skeptics have been proven wrong.
I'm not persuaded by the assurances that we hear that Russia has nothing to worry about. You may not humiliate a nation, a people, and think that it'll have no consequences. So my question is this a new strategy? I feel that if the same kind of games continue to be played, if one country plays some card against the other country, then all of those problems, all of those issues that we've been mentioning today will be very difficult to resolve.
При осуществлении полномочий президента Российской Федерации уважать и охранять права и свободы человека и гражданина.
Good afternoon. On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against Al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. These carefully targeted actions are designed to disrupt the use of Afghanistan as a terrorist base of operations. My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
There's been bombing in Georgia itself, in Gori, and outside of Tbilisi. Now, Georgia has as many as 2,000 soldiers on duty in Iraq right now, being a very good friend to the United States. Some of those Georgian soldiers, as they were being driven out of South Ossetia over the last couple of days, were saying, "Where is the United States?"
Right. Well, you know, Harry, military intervention here is unthinkable. Russia's a nuclear weapons state. They're very close to this region. Of course, we're very far away. Georgia is not now a member of NATO, so any talk of a formal security guarantee is not there anyway. It's going to be very interesting to see how hard we push to back up Vice President Cheney's words that this will not go unanswered, because I believe it will go unanswered militarily. But we still have a lot of economic and diplomatic steps.
The United Nations Security Council has adopted numerous resolutions concerning Georgia.
These resolutions are based on the premise that South Ossetia and Abkhazia remain within the borders of Georgia.
By day's end, the Georgians admitted that heavy Russian air support had cost them control of the town. Earlier, Georgian President Mikhail Saakashvili spoke confidently of Georgia's aims and called Russia the ultimate provocateur.
The Russian Federation has bombed the Georgian territory. Populated and peaceful areas have been bombed. It is nothing but a classic international aggression.
Putin later said he is pleased with the discussions, but noted certain problems, such as Russia's objections to U.S. anti-missile defense plans in Central Europe and continued NATO expansion.
The declaration that this process is not directed against Russia cannot satisfy us. National security cannot be built on promises.
On Thursday, NATO endorsed the missile defense plan. The Western military alliance also turned down a bid by Georgia and Ukraine to be put on an immediate path to membership, but declared it wants to bring the two former Soviet republics into the fold at some point in the future.
Russia's parliament has just authorized a military invasion of the Crimean Peninsula here in Ukraine.
This is a Russian invasion, the U.S. says. It has no doubt these are Russian forces and has demanded their immediate withdrawal.
The Russian military must stand down, the aspirations of the Ukrainian people must be respected, and political dialogue must be allowed to continue.
And what's been happening so far is that Russian soldiers have been going up to various Ukrainian bases and trying to take them over. Last night, they managed to capture a Ukrainian naval base in Balaclava, and this morning, they've showed up to this army base. So the Ukrainian commander of this base just had some negotiations with the Russian commander, and essentially, long story short, they've agreed to say, if you don't shoot, we won't shoot.
The situation is that the Russian military just showed up and told us to put our weapons into the warehouse and to disarm. We had some negotiations and decided that I'm not going to give up my weapons. I'm going to continue guarding the base. I'm not going to let them inside the base. If they want to, they can remain outside the base.
It has fueled civilian unrest across eastern Ukraine. In one city, pro-Russia demonstrators rampaged through City Hall and brutally beat those who oppose them.
I came to stop this American evil so that it doesn't come knocking on my door. So the New York Times photo from Georgia isn't of you?
Of course it's not me. I was in a completely different place at that time.
Where were you in 2008 during the war in Georgia?
I was not far from there.
In Kuban?
Yes.
So your name is Alexander and you are from Kuban?
Yes.
Can you give me your last name?
Можаев.
So you don't know who the other bearded man is?
It's the first time I've seen him.
Just seen my first Russian passport on an armed man here in eastern Ukraine. He's a Cossack from the Kuban region of Russia. The New York Times showed a picture of a man who looks like him from Georgia in 2008, who was part of the Russian Special Forces, claiming that he was that man. But it seems that he's somebody else, but he is actually from Russia, probably not from the Russian Special Forces, a Cossack.
The United States, as we speak, taking part in an emergency NATO meeting to decide how to respond. Dan, Diana?
It's really unclear what the Ukrainian government can do or what the U.S. government can do. The president has said publicly that there will be costs if the Russians invade. Now they have. What kind of costs can we impose on them?
Hard to figure out exactly what those would be. What the president has said already is the United States will stop planning for this G8 summit, which is supposed to be in Sochi, where the Olympics were just a few weeks ago. That's supposed to come up in June. So the United States could refuse to participate in that. They could also move beyond that, pull our ambassador or more of our delegation out. We don't have a full-time ambassador there right now. And then the big question is, are we willing to go farther, try to impose financial sanctions on Russia? One thing that seems pretty clear right now, no military action on the table at all. Back in when Vladimir Putin went into Georgia several years ago, President Bush did move warships into the region, did send humanitarian aid by military transport. That's about the most the United States could expect to do.
In the meantime, Putin just spent $50 billion trying to paint a new image for Russia. Does this just throw that out the door? And does he even care?
Well, I think that's the big question. Does he care right now? He sees Crimea as an important part, perhaps, of the Russian Empire right now. I think the big question is he going to expand more broadly into the rest of Ukraine? That is a real red line that could provoke a more serious reaction from the West.
Someone could rat us out. We could get attacked. They could say we're extremists or terrorists. So we communicate by phone, with text, and try not to meet each other. It's very dangerous here in Crimea. If we were in another region, we could behave more openly, but since there's 60,000 armed Russian soldiers here, and the government has been taken over by pro-Russian soldiers and people, everyone who is Ukrainian has to live under occupation like it's World War II again.
Hunter Biden was a director of Burisma, a Ukrainian energy company, from May 2014 until April 2019. In that time, he earned about US $3.9 million in director's fees.
Even if we imagine that one would arrest me for allegedly shooting this Boeing down, I don't consider myself guilty, and moreover, I believe that no international court has jurisdiction over Russian citizens. I, in any case, do not recognize the jurisdiction of an international court and consider that the citizen of a country should be judged in accordance with the national law.
The investigation team even modelled the missile strike itself and the devastating effect it would have had on the superstructure of the aircraft and the doomed passengers and crew inside it.
A Buck surface-to-air missile can reach an altitude of 80,000 feet, exceeding the flight altitude of flight MH17 by far. At 20 minutes and 3 seconds past 1, this warhead explodes to the left and above the cockpit of MH17. About 800 preformed fragments perforate the aeroplane.
They use Crimea as a military base.
Crimea is running dry, in large part because in 2014, Ukraine dammed the North Crimean Canal, which previously provided 85% of the peninsula's fresh water.
Today, the President and I discussed all the work that's ahead. We spoke about the threat to Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity posed by Russian aggression. It's simply unacceptable in the 21st century for countries to attempt to redraw borders by force in Europe, or anywhere for that matter, or to intervene militarily because they don't like a decision their neighbor has made. In fact, Russian behavior represents a flagrant violation of the bedrock principles of our international system, which is why the international community has responded with one voice, amplifying your voice, Mr. President, the voice of all Ukrainians, helping Ukrainians defend their sovereignty and their security, the security of your nation. The international community condemning Russian actions, expanding security assistance to Ukraine, imposing greater and greater costs on Russia for its illegal actions, and refusing to accept the so-called elections held by separatists on November the 2nd. Let me assure you, as Ukraine continues on this course, international partners will step up and help, starting with the United States. We're working closely with international institutions to make sure Ukraine has the financial resources and support that it needs. And as we do, we're looking for opportunities to improve Ukraine's business climate and increase trade and investment. What I can guarantee is that so long as, Mr. President, you and your colleagues keep faith with your commitment to build a more democratic and prosperous life, you will never be alone. The United States will be at your side, your partner, and your friend.
Azov came to prominence after taking back the port city of Mariupol from pro-Russian forces. Since then, its members have enjoyed a reputation as tough fighters with ultra-right affiliations. Azov has a fighting force of around 1,500 men. The battalion has since been incorporated into the Ukrainian National Guard, and as such takes orders from the Interior Ministry. Azov has also founded its own party, officially distinct from the battalion.
In 1 week, in November of 2018, Russia seized 3 Ukrainian ships and 24 sailors.
I'm feeling good, thank you! Thank you, everybody!
Zelensky actually studied law at university, but never practiced.
Next month, I will leave my post as president of the country. This is what was decided by the majority of Ukrainians.
In a debate last week, he said he wanted to break the system. Nobody really knows what he means by that. And this at a time when Ukraine is having to navigate a very delicate relationship in a conflict with Russia.
Lots of his critics would say that Zelensky has tried to promise all things to all people. He's more been about offering a sense of generational change, of being a new face, someone offering hope, offering a more positive campaign, while being pretty reticent on the detail of what he wants to do. In terms of the really big questions, in terms of joining NATO or the EU, Zelensky says that he himself is in favor, but that he would put that question to the Ukrainian people in referendums.
Because he has the external front to fight on against Russia, which is a very dangerous opponent. He has the internal front to fight against the oligarchs' vested interests. The promises he rallied on and the criticism he rallied on have set a very high bar of expectations for him.
Zelensky tore straight into the assembled politicians, announcing new laws to fight corruption and a snap election.
You have 2 months to do this. I'm disbanding this parliament. Glory to Ukraine.
It's always the United States that gets ripped. Frankly, Ukraine, we want to help them. And I do like the new president. You know why I like him? Because he was honest. They're like a wall between Russia and Europe. They're like a wall. They're a big, wide, beautiful wall. And he said, you know what, but it's important. And in fact, he came out and he said that. That was my only reason. Because I don't like being the sucker country. We were the sucker country for years and years. We're not the sucker country anymore.
In the case of neighbouring Ukraine, earlier this year, the European Union said you had more than 100,000 troops on the Ukrainian border. Was that an attempt to get Washington's attention?
Look, first, Ukraine itself constantly, and I think is still doing that. It kept bringing personnel and military equipment to the conflict area in the southeast of Ukraine, Donbass. That's one. Two is that we conducted exercises in our territory, and not just in the south of the Russian Federation, but also in the Far East and in the North and in the Arctic. Simultaneously, military exercises were being held in different parts of the Russian Federation. At the very same time, the US was conducting military exercises in Alaska. Do you know anything about it? Probably not. But I'll tell you that I do know. And that is in direct proximity to our borders. But that's in your territory, on your land. We didn't even pay attention to it. What is happening now? Now, at our southern borders, there is a war game, Defender Europe. 40,000 personnel, 15,000 units of military equipment. Part of them have been airlifted from the US continent directly to our borders. Did we airlift any of our military technology to the US borders? No, we did not.
Many of those,
why are you worried?
Many of those exercises are a response to your actions, Mr. President. Do you worry that your opposition to NATO has actually strengthened it? For 6 years, NATO has spent more on defense.
That's some defense. Some defense. During the USSR era, Gorbachev, who is still, thank God, with us, you can ask him, got a promise, a verbal promise. However, it was a promise that there would be NATO expansion to the east. Where are those promises? 2 waves of expansion.
Where is that written down? Where is that promise written down?
Right. Well done. Well done. Correct. You've got a point. Nya. Got you good. Well, congratulations. Of course, everything should be sealed and written on paper.
Will you commit now not to send any further Russian troops into Ukrainian sovereign territory?
Look, did we say that we were planning to send our armed formations anywhere? We conducted war games in our territory. How can this not be clear? I'm saying it again because I want your audience to hear it. I want your listeners to hear it, both on the screens of their television sets and on the internet. We conducted military exercises in our territory. Imagine if we sent our troops into direct proximity to your borders. What would have been your response? We didn't do that. We did it in our territory. You conducted war games in Alaska, God bless you. But you had crossed an ocean, brought thousands of personnel and thousands of units of military equipment close to our borders, and yet you believe that we're acting aggressively, and somehow you're not. Just look at that. Pot calling the kettle black.
China is working on its 4th aircraft carrier. It has 2. Russia has 1, and it's not in service at the moment. China refused to take part in arms control talks last year. You complain so much about NATO to your west. Why do you never complain about China's militarization to your east?
The first thing I want to say is that over the last few years, the last few decades, we have developed a strategic partnership relationship between Russia and China that previously had not been achieved in the history of our 2 nations. A high level of trust and cooperation, and in all areas, in politics, in the economy, in technology, and in the area of military and technical cooperation. We do not believe that China is a threat to us. That's one. China is a friendly nation. It has not declared us an enemy, as the United States has done.
China hasn't been...
Don't you know anything about this? So that's number one. Number 2 is that China is a huge, powerful country, 1.5 billion people. In terms of purchasing power parity, the Chinese economy has exceeded the size of the US economy. And in terms of trade, for the previous year, last year, China tied Europe for the first place, whereas the US dropped to the 2nd position.
And an entire movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, appeared. I'm not going to go into details, I'll spare you. But we've seen pogroms, we've seen, looting and violations and riots. We sympathize with the Americans, but we do not want for the same thing to happen on the Russian soil, and we'll do anything possible to prevent this. And it's not about me fearing anything. If you want to think that... Can you please give the mic?
You didn't answer my question, sir. If all of your political opponents are dead, in prison, poisoned, doesn't that send a message that you do not want a fair political fight?
The magnificent $125 million vessel is sailing back home to Russia in a bid, experts say, to prevent it from being seized by the West should Putin invade Ukraine. The Graceful had been docked at this boatyard in Germany since December for refurbishment, but made a hurried exit before the work was completed.
Isn't it Europe that should be saying and proving them wrong? Isn't it Europe who should be saying today that our citizens have a positive attitude towards Ukraine joining the Union? Why are we avoiding this question? Doesn't Ukraine deserve to have direct and frank answers? The same is true about NATO. We are told the doors are open, but so far the strangers are not allowed. If not all the members are willing to see us there, or all members don't want to see us there, be honest about it. Open doors are good, but we need open answers. What else can we do now? We can continue the effective support of Ukraine and its defense capabilities, providing the European perspective, providing the support as are provided to the candidate countries, and providing specific timelines for Ukraine possible membership in their alliance. We need support for the transformation in our country to create the Stability and Restoration Fund, the Land Lease Program, supplying new armament and equipment to our army, the army which is protecting the whole Europe. An effective preventive sanctions package is what we need to restrain the aggression and the energy integration of the Ukraine into European Union in the times when Nord Stream 2 is being used as a weapon. All these questions require answers. Instead, there is silence. And while this silence persists, there will be no silence in the east of Ukraine, in the east of Europe, and in the whole world. I do hope finally the whole world will understand this and Europe will understand this. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very grateful to the countries who have supported Ukraine with their words, with their declaration and specific support. Those who are on our side, on the side of truth, on the side of international law. I'm not calling my friends out by names. I don't want some countries to be ashamed, but this is their business. This is their matter. These are their countries, their karma, and this is their consciousness that they have to look into. Although I don't know how they will be able to explain these actions to the 2 people who were killed and 3 wounded Ukrainian soldiers today, and 3 girls from Kyiv, 10, 6 and 1 years old, who don't have a father any longer. At 6 o'clock in the morning, East European time, when Ukrainian scout officer was killed from the artillery shell prohibited by Minsk. I don't know what he thought about at the last second of his life. He didn't really for sure understand what kind of agenda we need for the meeting to stop the war in the East. But what he knew is the answer to the question that I asked at the very beginning. He very well knows who is lying here. Rest in peace to him and to all those who have died during these years of war in the east of our country. Thank you.
Is Russia really interested to have a small, tiny strip of Ukraine soil integrated in their country? No, this is nonsense. I think Putin is probably putting pressure on it because he can do it. And he knows that he splits the European Union. But what he really wants is respect. He wants, on eye level, he wants respect. And my God, giving someone respect is low cost, even no cost. So if I was asked, it is easy to even give him the respect he really demands and probably also deserves. Russia is an old country. Russia is an important, even we, India, Germany, we need Russia because we need Russia against China.
Vladimir Putin was also in attendance. He signed an important energy deal with Xi Jinping. China will buy oil and gas worth $117 billion from Russia. $117 billion. It's simple logic. If Europe shuts the tap, all of that Russian gas will have to go somewhere, and that somewhere could well be China. And the numbers support this plan. In 2021, China-Russia trade reached $146 billion. That was up almost 36% from 2020. So Xi and Putin are sinking their economy. Even Washington is aware of this plan.
If we see foreign companies, including those in China, doing their best to backfill U.S. export control actions, to evade them, to get around them. I wouldn't want to speculate on what those tools are, but we do have tools that can address that, and that would seek to account for that.
That's a warning for Chinese companies. If you help Russia, we will target you. The problem is, such threats may have worked in 2014. Back then, Chinese companies needed the Western market. Today, the equation has changed. China won't think twice before violating Western sanctions. But what's in it for them? Vladimir Putin is getting a market for his oil. He's getting relief from sanctions. What is Xi Jinping getting? Well, he's getting two things. Number one, a template for invading Taiwan. China is looking for America's weaknesses. How eagerly are they supporting Ukraine? What kind of weapons are they sending? Will US soldiers get involved? These answers will determine China's own plans for Taiwan. If America's response is weak, it will embolden China. Plus, it's a valuable distraction for them.
He has much larger ambitions in Ukraine. He wants to, in fact, reestablish the former Soviet Union. That's what this is about. And I think that his ambitions are completely contrary to the place where the rest of the world has arrived.
You're confident that these devastating sanctions are going to be as devastating as Russian missiles and bullets and tanks?
Yes, Russian bullets, missiles, and tanks in Ukraine. Yes, I am.
You've been talking about the threat of these sanctions for several weeks now.
Yes, but the threat of the sanctions and imposing the sanctions and seeing the effect of the sanctions are two different things. They're two different things. And he's going to begin to see the effect of the sanctions.
And what will that do? How will that change his mindset here, given he's attacking Ukraine?
Because it will so weaken his country that he'll have to make a very, very difficult choices of whether to continue to move toward being a second-rate power or, in fact, respond.
You said in recent weeks that big nations cannot bluff when it comes to something like this. You recently said that the idea of personally sanctioning President Putin was on the table. Is that a step that you're prepared to take? And if not,
it's not a bluff, it's on the table.
Sanctioning President Putin?
Yes.
Why not sanction him today, sir? Why not sanction him today?
Mr. President, if I can, you detailed some severe and swift new sanctions today and said the impact it will have over time. But given the full-scale invasion, given that you're not pursuing disconnecting Russia from what's called SWIFT, the international banking system, or other sanctions at your disposal, respectfully, sir, what more are you waiting for?
Specifically, with the sanctions we've imposed exceed SWIFT. The sanctions we imposed exceed anything that's ever been done. The sanctions we imposed have generated 2/3 of the world joining us. They are profound sanctions. Let's have a conversation in another month or so to see if they're working.
We joined a Russian military convoy making its way across Ukraine to the city of Melitopol. And for hours on end, we watched convoy after convoy roar past us. Helicopters circled back and forth, protecting convoys from ambushes and providing cover. The frenzy of activity is sobering. It really drives home that this is a vicious fight, and losses on both sides are high.
нас самолет сбили. Прямо у нас. Вон.
Вот. Парашют.
Да, на пакеты набрали. Самолет чей хоть? Русский.
Утопить того мудака, блядь.
Резут нахуй свели.
The city is said to be calm. We were unable to enter, but we haven't heard any shooting in the vicinity of the city or on our way here. The problem in the city now is the humanitarian situation there. Supplies are said to be running low. Convoys and logistics are down because of the situation, the current situation in Ukraine. So it is, we have heard, a priority to deliver humanitarian aid to the city. We've also heard that locals have organized patrols. They're afraid of looters. There's been a lot of that apparently in the city, and locals have organized patrols, 5-man groups patrolling the city at night during the day to keep looters away.
Meantime, Russian citizens by the thousands are protesting the war in Ukraine at great personal risk to themselves.
I don't want this war. Almost no one here wants it. I want the whole world to see that we don't want it. We don't want it to weigh on our conscience for decades. I don't want to feel guilty for living here through my whole life.
Many Russians see Ukrainians as their brothers and sisters. Plenty have family and friends there. Olga Maheva doesn't want Putin's assault to lead to both countries' destruction.
It is a crime, both against Ukraine and Russia. I think it is killing both Ukraine and Russia. I am outraged. I haven't slept for 3 nights, and I think we must now declare very loudly that we don't want to be killed and don't want Ukraine to be killed.
But as swiftly as Russians began to decry the conflict, so too came the armed police to strangle the dissent. One video on social media showed Russian security forces in St. Petersburg roughing up a woman holding a peace sign and a baby. Speaking out risked not only physical harm, but Russian authorities warned protesters could face criminal charges that could mark their records for life. An independent monitoring group reports that more than 6,000 demonstrators have been arrested. But Facebook and other tech giants like Apple, Google, and Microsoft are flexing their muscle on Moscow, limiting the reach of Kremlin-controlled media outlets. Oligarchs like billionaire Oleg Deripaska and steel baron Alexei Mordashov have called for peace. Sanctions are beginning to threaten the Russian economy.
In aviation, Boeing has suspended part supplies for Russian airlines. Airbus has followed suit. Car makers Volvo, Ford, Mitsubishi, BMW, Honda and Jaguar are suspending car exports to the country. And in the world of entertainment, Disney, Sony and Warner Brothers won't release new films in Russia. Apple won't be selling new iPhones there and is suspending Apple Pay.
Home rental company Airbnb says it'll offer free temporary housing for up to 100,000 refugees fleeing Ukraine. CEO Brian Jeski said sent letters to leaders of Poland, Romania, Germany and Hungary offering help to house the people. At least 300,000 Ukrainian refugees have entered the EU since the Russian invasion began.
Comedian and popular talk show host Ivan Urgant posted a black square on Instagram captioned with "Fear and pain, no to war." The show was then taken off the air. The Russian TV station said removing it had nothing to do with his post. And last week, tennis star Andrei Rublev, ranked 7th in the world, wrote 3 words on a camera lens after winning a tournament match: "No war, please." Just a week prior, he'd won a doubles title with partner Denis Molchanov, a Ukrainian. As the condemnations, protests, and crackdowns continue, the Russians, not to mention Ukrainians, are not alone in their outrage. Demonstrations erupted around the world after Putin launched his assault. From the ancient city of Jerusalem to New York City, home of the largest Ukrainian population in the U.S., to Berlin, where more than 100,000 protesters made a show of force.
Well, we have seen Chinese economic and financial support for Russia. Even though China does not directly support Russia's expansionism to any degree, Beijing strongly feels the necessity to maintain and boost strategic partnership with Moscow. China has been supplying electronics, machinery, and other manufactured goods to Russia in exchange for food and energy. On the first day of Russia's attack on Ukraine, China suddenly announced that it would allow the import of wheat throughout the territory of Russia, which was partly banned due to contamination problems.
I just think that, and the other thing is, you know, you draw these lines and you don't respond, you diminish your credibility. And it's just dangerous.
The question now is, what next? Putin has promised to denazify Ukraine, to free its people, he said. But how and how long it'll take is still unclear.
Do you know what they say amongst the Russian people? They say those who are destined to be hanged are not going to drown.
A warning may come quite unexpectedly. We will now tell you what to do if a warning sounds when you are at home. You may have to stay in your home for about 14 days, so make sure to store plenty of water and food for your family. Best to buy lots of different kinds of foods if you can, so that you won't get bored with too much of the same thing. The fire brigade may not be able to reach you, and you will have to protect yourself without any help. So prepare now, and you will have to protect yourself without any help. So prepare now,